Okay, so good evening, everyone, especially to you, Mom Letlet. So for today, we will be discussing about Philippine art scene architecture by our group, which is Group 5. Now, before we start with our discussion for today, next slide, please. Let me introduce my group mates. So, yours truly, Arso Evelyn. Next, Kashano Sheena Kate. Next, Fernan Krisha. And next, Lauron Shoni. And lastly, for Lahet Nikki. So now, next slide, please. Okay, so first, let's talk about the pre-colonial architecture. So next slide, please. Okay, so pre-colonial architecture, before the arrival of Spanish colonizer in the 16th century, the Philippines had a rich tradition of indigenous architecture that was shaped by the local environment, climate, and cultural practices. The architecture of this period was characterized by its use of native materials, sustainable design principles, and adaptability to the tropical climate. So, everyone, during the pre-colonial architecture, the types of the structure built in the Philippines, it during this time, early Filipinos already had their own way of designing and constructing buildings based on their environment, climate, and cultural traditions. So the architecture during this period was mainly influenced by the natural surroundings of the island. Since the Philippines has a tropical climate with heavy rains, strong winds, and hot temperatures, people built structures that could adapt to these conditions. So their buildings were designed to be lightweight, well ventilated, and durable enough to withstand the local weather. So another important feature of pre-colonial architecture was the use of native materials. So early Filipinos used materials that were easily available in nature, such as bamboo, wood, nipa palm, rattan, and grass. So these materials were practical because they were easy to gather, affordable, and simple to repair or replace when damaged. So pre-colonial architecture also followed sustainable designs principles. This means that the material used were natural and renewable, making the buildings environmentally friendly. So that structures were designed in a way that worked with nature instead of against it, helping people live comfortably while using the resources around them responsibly. So overall, the pre-colonial architecture in the Philippines shows how early Filipinos were able to create functional and sustainable buildings that suited their lifestyle and environment. So their designs were practical, adaptable, and closely connected to their culture and natural surroundings. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are the key features of pre-colonial architecture. So first, we have here use of native materials. So structures were primarily made of organic materials such as bamboo, nipa, kogon grass, and wood. So these materials were abundant, lightweight, and well suited to the tropical climate. Next, we have here adaptation to climate. So the designs were highly functional and adapted to the humid and typhoon-prone environment. Elevated floors, steep roofs, and open spaces allowed for natural ventilation and protection against floods and pests. Lastly, we have here community oriented. So, architectural designs were often communal, reflecting the social and cultural values of indigenous communities. Houses and community structures were typically arranged around a central space for social and ceremonial activities. Next slide, please. So here, let's talk about the examples of pre-colonial architecture. Next slide, please. Okay, first we have here the Bahay Kubo or the Nipa Hut. So the Bahay Kubo or the Nipa Hut is the most iconic example of pre-colonial Filipino architecture. So it is a small elevated house made of bamboo and nipa palm or cogon grass. So it features a simple rectangular layout with the large windows and a high pitch roof designed to maximize airflow and provide shade. So the house is built on stilts to protect against flooding and pests and to keep the living area cool. Next slide, please. Okay, next we have have here the Torogan. So the Torogan is the traditional house of the Maranao University in Mindanao. So it is a large, stately house built on wooden stilts, so which intricately carved beams and panels. So the most distinctive feature is the panolong. So a wall-like decorative element that extends from the beams, often adorned with vibrant ochre, which is the traditional Maranao motif. So the Torogan served not only as a residence but also as a symbol of status and power. Next slide, please. Next, another example that we have here is the Binoron. So the Binoron is a traditional house of the Ivatan people of Batanes. So it is characterized by its thick walls made of stone and lime, and a cogon grass roof designed to withstand strong winds and harsh weather conditions. So these houses are low and robust, with small windows and doors to minimize wind resistance. Next slide, please. Okay, so lastly, we have here Bale. So the Bale is the traditional house of the Ifugao people in the Cordillera region. So it is a small one-room structure elevated on four wooden posts. The walls and floors are made of wooden planks, and the roof is thatched with reed grass. So the space below the house is used for storage or as a workspace. Next slide, please. Okay, now what is the cultural significance of pre-colonial architecture? So, pre-colonial architecture had strong cultural relevance because it reflected the beliefs, the traditions, and the values of early Filipino communities. So, buildings were not designed only for shelter, but were also connected to the people's spiritual beliefs, respect for nature, and social structure. So many structures were carefully planned to harmonize with the natural environment and to show respect for ancestral spirits that communities believe were present around them. So in some cases, the design, the size, or the location of the house also show the social status of individuals within the community. So overall, pre-colonial architecture demonstrated the resourcefulness of early Filipinos, their deep respect for nature, and their strong sense of unity within their communities. Next slide, please. Okay, this time let's proceed with Spanish colonial architecture. Next slide, please. Okay, so unsa may architecture during colonial era. So, Spanish colonial architecture refers to the architectural style that developed in the Philippines during Spanish rule from 1521 to 1898. So, during this period, Spanish colonization introduced strong European and Catholic influences that greatly changed how buildings were designed and constructed. So, the Spanish introduced more durable materials such as stone, brick, and mortar, replacing many of the lighter wooden structures used in the pre-colonial period. So, architecture during this time kay focus on important aspects of colonial life, especially religion, defense, and governance, which led to the construction of churches, forts, government buildings, and planned towns across the country. So these structures reflected the power and the influence of Spanish rule in Philippine society. Next slide, please. Okay, so um, during the Spanish colonial architecture, the architectural developments of Spanish of this era in the Philippines are reflection of the Spanish style, so which can be observed in two main architectural construction design, designated colonial marks of the Spanish era architecture. First, we have here domestic structure, and next we have here ecclesiastical structure. So next slide, please. So ang domestic structure these are kanang building types that relate to residential use such as single family homes, duplexes, townhouses, apartment buildings, and condominiums. Now let's know some of the example of domestic structure. Next slide, please. Okay, so first we have here the Burgos house. So kaning the Father Burgos house is noteworthy for being a representation of an institutional preservation of a Spanish era colonial mansion. So, despite its adaptive reuse into a museum, details of layer of history are demonstrated in the house. So, it is configured on a north to south axis and it is built of brick and wood with a steeply pitched roof, elements that are homogeneous to the rest of the preserved colonial buildings in the historic town of Vigan. Next, we have here the Raimundo House. So, the Raimundo House was built in 1861, the same year that our national hero Jose Rizal was born, and also the year that the San Bartolome Church was completed. So passers-by almost always take a second look at its original stone gateway that's reminiscent of portals of Intramuros. So, um, your yes, that's all for the Raimundo House. Next slide, please. Next, another example of domestic structure is Carino House in Candon, Ilocos Sur. So the house was the Gabriela and husband Diego began their uprising against the Spaniard functionaries in Ilocos in 1762 with the help of the British forces. So the house, which was continuously occupied by the Cariños until the 1990s, has a unique feature unlike the Balay na Batoni in Vigan City. For example, it has an outer wall where the servants supposedly pass so as not to listen to the conversation of the owners of their guests. And next, we have here the Casa Manila. So, the Casa Manila is a museum in Intramuros depicting colonial lifestyle during Spanish colonization of the Philippines. So, the museum is the imposing stone and wood structure in 1850, one of the grand houses in Barrio San Luis, so one of the four original villages of Intramuros. It is located across historic San Agustin Church and bounded by Calaril, General Luna, Cabildo, and Ordandanta streets. So the other two are Los Hidalgos and Cogoyan Mansion. So next slide, please. So next we have here the other type, which is the ecclesiastical structure. So this refers to the architecture of buildings of Christian churches. So next slide, please. So here are some of the examples of ecclesiastical structure. First, we have here the Santa Maria Church. So the Church of Nuestra Señora de la Asunción in Santa Maria with its convento are on a hill surrounded by a defensive wall. So as you can see here in the picture. So the brick church follows the standard Philippine layout with a monumental facade masking a straight roof line covering a long rectangular building. So the walls are devoid of ornament but have delicately carved side entrances and strong buttresses. So next we have here Paoay Church. So this one kay the Paoay Church, also known as the Church of the San Agustin, is located at Paoay, Ilocos Norte. So it is the most outstanding example in the Philippines of an earthquake. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so here, some of the other example of ecclesiastical structure. So first, we have here Miyagaw Church. So the Miyagaw Church, also known as the Church of Santo Tomas de Villanueva, stands on the highest point in the town of Miyagaw, Iloilo. So the church tower serves as a lookout against Muslim raids. Next slide. For the next one, San Agustin Church. So this one kay San Agustin Church, also known as the Arcodocesan Shrine of Our Lady of Consolanion. So it is a Roman Catholic church under the okay. So the massive structure of the church is highlighted by the symmetry and splendor of the interiors. So I think that would be all for my part. Let me pass you to the next reporter. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you, Evelyn. Now let us move on to the American colonial architecture. So, American colonial architecture refers to building styles that were introduced by European settlers. So, these styles were used in many structures such as homes, churches, and government buildings from around 1600 to the 19th century. Now, what are these different styles, man? So let us know the different styles in this American colonial architecture. So next slide, please. Okay, so first we have here the first period English style. So um, first period English style is also known as the late medieval style. So this style was brought by early English settlers. So buildings in this style were usually made of wood with steep roofs, small windows, and large chimneys, as you can see in the pictures attached. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so next is we have here the Spanish colonial style. So this type of architecture was influenced by Spanish colonizers. So these buildings were often made of thick stucco walls, clay tile roofs, and arched doorways, which helped keep the buildings cool in warm climates. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so third style is we have here the French colonial style. So this style developed in areas colonized by the French, such as parts of Louisiana. So French colonial buildings often have raised foundations, large porches, and tall windows to allow better airflow. Next slide, please. Okay, so next is the we have here the Dutch colonial style. So the Dutch colonial style is recognized by its gambrel roof, which looks similar to a barn roof with two slopes on each side. So these houses were usually built using brick or stone. And next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so lastly, we have here the Georgian style. So the Georgian style became popular during the 18th century. So it focused on symmetry and balance with centered doors, evenly spaced windows, and elegant decorative features. So, American colonial architecture reflects the cultural influence of different European settlers. So, these styles shaped many early buildings in the United States and continue to influence architecture even today. So, next slide, please. Now, let us know the American colonial architecture common styles. So, first is we have here the neoclassical style. So, this style is inspired by ancient Greek and Roman architecture. It is known for its tall columns, balanced design, and grand appearance, which is why it is often used for important buildings. Second is the colonial revival style. So this style became popular in the late 19th century and was created to bring back the traditional colonial architecture designs. It is commonly used in formal buildings such as government offices and schools. And lastly is the bungalow style. So bungalow style is mostly used for residential houses. So these homes are low rise with simple designs, sloping roofs, and wide porch. making them comfortable and practical for families. So that's it for American colonial architecture. Now let's move on to the modern Philippine architecture. So, modern Philippine architecture is a style that developed after World War II. It combines modern architectural design with Filipino culture and the country's tropical climate. So, this style focuses on simplicity, functionality, and open spaces. Architects design buildings that allow natural light and ventilation, making them more comfortable in a tropical environment. So, modern Philippine architecture also uses a combination of modern materials like concrete and steel and local materials such as wood and bamboo. So this helps create buildings that are both climate responsive and culturally meaningful. So in the next slide, we can see an example of the modern Philippine architecture. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the example of modern Philippine architecture. So it reflects how modern design can adapt to the local culture, environment, and needs of the Filipino people. So that's all for my part. Let me pass you to the next reporter.
Next slide, please. So now I will be discussing vernacular architecture. So it is part of the Philippine art scene in architecture. So to begin with, what is vernacular architecture? Next slide, please. Please go next slide. All right. So when we say vernacular architecture, it refers to buildings that are designed and built using local materials, traditional techniques, and knowledge passed down through generations. So these structures are usually made by local people, not professional architects, and they are designed based on the climate, culture, and lifestyle of the community. So, in the Philippine context, vernacular architecture shows how Filipino adapted to our tropical climate, natural disasters, and social way of living. So, next slide, please. So, here are the examples of Philippine vernacular architecture. Next slide, please. So, now let's dig deeper into the characteristics of Philippine vernacular architecture. Next slide, please. All right. So first is the use of local materials. So traditional Filipino houses were built using materials that were easy to find in the area, such as bamboo, wood, nipa, kogon grass, and rattan. So these materials are lightweight and flexible, which is very important because of the Philippines often experiences earthquakes and typhoons. Now, the next characteristics is the climate responsive design. So, vernacular houses were designed to stay cool and safe. So, most houses are raised on stilts to protect from flooding and to allow air to circulate underneath. So they also have large windows and open spaces to let air flow freely inside the house. So the roofs are usually steep, which helps rainwater drain quickly during heavy rains. Then the third one is the social values. So the third is a reflection of Filipino culture and values. So vernacular architecture reflects Filipino values such as family closeness, hospitality, and respect for nature. So homes often have open areas where families gather and where guests are welcomed. Now, next slide please. Let's go to examples of Philippine vernacular architecture. Next slide, please. Next slide. So one example is the Bahay Kubo. So the Bahay Kubo is the most well-known traditional Filipino house. It is made of bamboo and nipa and is raised on stilts. Even though it looks simple, it is very practical. It stays cool, is easy to repair, and fits perfectly with rural Filipino life. So another example is the Bahay na Bato. Next slide, please. Mm. Next one is the Bahay na Bato. So this house developed during the Spanish colonial period. It combines indigenous Filipino design and Spanish influence. The ground floor is made of stone or brick, while the upper floor is made of wood. It has large copy shell windows that allow light and air to enter the house. So, next slide please. So now we have also indigenous houses from different ethnic groups. The first one is the Ifugao Ballet. It's compact and sturdy. It is designed to protect against cold weather in the mountains. Then the second one is the Turugan of Maranao is a royal house known for its beautiful carvings. And the Abatan stone houses in Batanes have very thick walls to withstand strong winds and typhoons. So vernacular architecture is important because it is not just about building houses. It is also a form of art. It showcases traditional craftsmanship, creativity, and Filipino identity. It also influences modern Filipino architecture today. So many architects now adopt vernacular designs to create buildings that are more sustainable, environment friendly, and cultural meaningful. So that's all for my part. Thank you.
All right, so now we'll be talking about religious and civic structures. So, religious and civic structures in the Philippines are important architectural forms that reflect the country's history, culture, and system of governance. Most of these structures developed during Spanish and American periods and continue to influence Philippine architecture up until today. So, religious and civic structures in the Philippines reflect the country's history, culture, and governance. And many of these buildings were developed during the Spanish and American periods, and they influenced how towns and communities were organized. So, next slide, please. So here, the first one is it talks about religious structures, mainly churches. So churches are among the oldest and most significant architectural landmarks in the Philippines. They were mainly built during the Spanish colonial period and served both religious and political purposes. So churches are some of the oldest buildings in the Philippines, kuno, and they played an important role in both religion and community life during the Spanish period. And the first one that we will be talking is architectural features. So churches were commonly built in the Baroque style. So they're ca- characterized, by grand facade, dramatic details, and ornamentation. Here, churches were often built in the Baroque style, which is known for large and detailed designs. And because of earthquakes are common in the Philippines, churches were built with thick walls, wide structures, and strong supports to make them more stable. So, in the next slide, we will be seeing the example. Next slide, please. So, this one, the Paway Church in Ilocos Norte, Miagao Iloilo Church, Santa Maria Ilocos Sur Church, San Agustin Church in Manila. So, next slide, please. So, as what I've said a while ago, due to frequent earthquakes,
Filipino churches developed a unique style known as earthquake baroque featuring fixed stone walls, low and wide structures, massive buttresses for support. So materials used include coral stone, adobe, bricks, and limestone. Now let's proceed to the functions of churches. So what are the functions of churches? So first one is it serves as places of worship and centers of religious life. Second, acted as symbols of Spanish authority and Catholic influence. And the last one is used as commonly centers, refuge during calamities, and venues for social gatherings. So churches serve not only as place for worship thou, but also as centers where people gathered for community activities. They also symbolize the strong influence of Catholicism and Spanish authority. Next slide, please. All right, so here we will be also talking about civic structures, mainly town halls and government buildings. So here, civic structures represent the political and administrative system of the Philippines. These buildings were essential in organizing communities and governance, especially during colonial times. So here, civic structures, guys, are buildings used for government and public services. These structures help organize leadership and decision making, in towns. So let's proceed to the next slide. Now, the first one is town halls or municipal buildings. So, it is usually located near the central plaza following the Spanish colonial town plan. Second is that it is designed to symbolize authority, order, and governance. Third, built using stone or concrete with simple yet formal design. So town halls are usually located now near the town plaza. So following the Spanish town plan, they serve as the main offices of local leaders and government officials. The second one is the architectural influences. So here we will be seeing two periods. First one is Spanish period and American period. Spanish period, guys, stone buildings with arc windows and thick walls. And American period are neoclassical designs featuring columns, symmetry, and spacious interiors. So here during the Spanish period, civic buildings were made of stone with simple but strong design. In the American period, on the other hand, buildings began to show neoclassical styles with columns, symmetry, and larger spaces. Let's proceed to the next slide. Here, the third one is it talks about functions of civic buildings. So the first one is that it served as offices for local officials. Second bullet, used for public meetings, legal proceedings, and community decision making. Third bullet is that it represented the presence of government in everyday Filipino life. So in here, these buildings were used for government work, public meetings, and legal matters. They represented the authority of the government within the community. Now, let's proceed to the next slide. Okay, as you can see, here's the example. Now, let's proceed to the next slide. Thank you. Now we will be also talking about ancestral houses. So what does ancestral houses mean? So ancestral houses are residential structures that reflect the social status, lifestyle, and cultural values of Filipino families, particularly during the Spanish colonial era. So ancestral houses show the lifestyle, culture, and social status of Filipino families during the Spanish colonial period. So next slide, please. Here we will be talking about bahay na bato. What is bahay na bato di ay? So it's a combination of indigenous Filipino houses and Spanish architecture, typically two stories, so ground floor and upper floor. So ground floor are made of stone, and particularly they are storage or business use. Upper floor are made of wood or living area. So features include large windows with capis shells, ventanillas for air circulation, and steep tiled roofs. Now in here, the Bahay na Bato combines Filipino and Spanish kuan daw, architectural styles. And it usually has a stone ground floor and a wooden upper floor with large windows and good ventilation suitable for the tropical climate here in the Philippines. In the next slide, we'll be seeing the example of this one. Please, next slide. Thank you. As you can see here, please observe the picture. The first, the ground floor is made of stone, and the upper floor is made of wood. Now let's proceed to the next slide. Okay, here we'll be also talking about cultural importance. So what's the meaning of this one? So it's symbol of wealth and social status during the colonial period, designed to adapt to the tropical climate here in the Philippines and preserved today as heritage houses and museum. Here guys, these houses were often owned by mga dato nga Filipino families before, and they symbolize social status. Today, many of them are preserved as cultural heritage sites. Here in Karkar City, one of the famous, I mean, not one of the famous, but one of the examples are, um, as you can see, ubos sa kanang plaza or kanang simbahan diha, naa diha yung mga kuan na balay. Gi-preserve nila. Alright, so that wraps up here in my reporting. Thank you. Let's proceed to the next reporter.
Yeah. So now, let's talk about the contemporary Filipino architects and architectural trends. So let's first define what is contemporary Philippine architecture. So it reflects how Filipino architects respond to modern needs. So from the word contemporary, it means modern. So it responds to modern needs while staying rooted in local culture, climate, and social realities. So now we can see here the first Filipino contemporary architect, which is Francisco Maniosa, or known as Bobby Maniosa. So he is one of the most significant and influential architects in the Philippines. Uh, taking time to He takes time to explore and revitalize the old construction methods alongside local materials that fit the Philippine setup, solidified his status as one of the country's pioneers of neo-vernacular architecture in the Philippines. So why he is known for his neo-vernacular architecture in the Philippines? Because uh, Bobby Manyosa used materials like bamboo, nipa and cogon grass, wood or local hardwoods, rattan, kapis shells, and stone and adobe. So here is the example, the closer look for the closer look of his work, the Coconut Palace or Tahanang Pilipinos in CCP Complex, Pasay. So we can see here, right? He uses rattan, a bamboo, stone, and adobe. So Manyosa believed buildings in the Philippines should be climate responsive, culturally rooted, and environmentally sustainable. So by using local materials and traditional techniques, he created architecture that is both modern and distinctly Filipino. So we can see here the whole face or the whole image of the coconut palace. So it is very amazing how he created this work or architecture. So we can also see his work, the Metro Trail, Light Trail Transit 1 in Baclaran in Monumento, terminals, and stations. So it is one of his work as well. Let's talk about the next architect in the contemporary architecture, which is Leandro V. Locsin. So he is famous because of his works characterized by massive concrete forms in modern and monumental spaces. So here we can see the work of Leandro V. Locsin. So it is the parish of the Holy Sacrifice. So yes. So his work is, yeah. So his work again characterized by massive concrete, modern lines, and monumental spaces. So for the next architect, we have Carlos, this one, Carlos Argeles. He is known for his ability to blend modern design principles with Philippine aesthetics. So here, this one is the iconic facade of the Film Life building in Ermita, so which is being dismantled in today's or on now. The structure designed by architect Carlos Argeles and built in 1961 was turned over to a new owner in 2012 and has since been idle despite its status as one of the country's most groundbreaking architecture design principles with Philippine aesthetics. So, the next architect we have here in the contemporary architecture, he is Ed Calma. He represents the new generation of Filipino architects who are pushing boundaries and exploring innovative approaches to design. So, young projects are characterized by clean lines, functional spaces, and a deep consideration of human experience. So, here, these are the example or one of the examples of Ed Calma's design. So here, the first picture, a building, a tall building, and in the second picture, we can see the very intricate and amazing design. So, in here, we are going to talk about the key characteristics of the modern Philippine architecture. So, we have here a fusion and fusion of old and new, use of local materials, adaptability to climate, adaptability to, yeah, sorry for this, it was doubled. So functionality and aesthetics, community-centric design. So in short, guys, this means that the characteristics of modern Philippine architecture is combining traditional Filipino elements with modern design techniques, promoting sustainability and cultural identity. So, designing buildings suited to the tropical environment. So, here in the Philippines, also balancing practical use with visual appeal, and lastly, creating spaces that encourage interaction and cultural connection. So, in conclusion, modern Philippine architecture reflects a balance between tradition and innovation, blending Filipino cultural elements with contemporary design. It creates sustainable, climate responsive spaces that are both functional and meaningful for communities. So, lastly, I'll give you this uh, a saying that modern Philippine architecture seamlessly weaves together traditional and contemporary elements, showcasing the creativity of Filipino architects and their deep understanding of cultural significance. It is a testament to the country's rich architectural heritage and its embrace of innovation and sustainability. So, in short, it proved that Filipino architecture can be both modern and deeply rooted in tradition through the use of local materials and traditional building methods. It helps shape a design style that proudly reflects Filipino identity, and culture. So I hope that you have learned something from our report today, which is about the different kinds of uh, architecture in Philippine art scene. So that would be all for our reporting today. Thank you for listening, everyone.